My son left his 2 young daughters on my doorstep and vanished for 12 years. When he finally returned, he had the audacity to sue me for stealing his own children. He looked right at me, his eyes cold and empty, and said the words that would cut me deeper than any knife. "You stole my children, Mother. All these years, you've kept them from me." That was the moment my world tilted on its axis, a slow, sickening fall into a darkness I couldn't have imagined. My son, David, the boy I had raised, the man I had prayed for, was standing in my living room after a 12-year silence, and his first words were a lie meant to destroy me. It felt like a punch to the stomach, a brutal betrayal that made the air feel thin and sharp. He had just walked back into my life as if he'd only been gone for a day, his face fuller, his hair a little grayer, but his voice was like a stranger's. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him how much he had hurt me, how every single day had been a struggle, a blur of scraped knees and school recitals and sleepless nights, all because of him. But I just stood there, speechless, because his daughters, my sweet granddaughters, Lila and Chloe, were right behind him, their eyes wide with confusion. The day he vanished had been so different. It was a Tuesday, the kind of dreary, gray afternoon that promised rain. David pulled into my driveway in his beat-up pickup truck, the girls in the back seat. Lila was 5, Chloe was 3. "Can you watch them for a little while, Mom?" he asked, his voice strained. I saw the worry in his eyes, but I just nodded. It wasn't the first time. I loved having them. I smiled and told them to go inside, that Grandma had cookies. I watched him drive away, thinking he'd be back in an hour or two, just like always. But as the hours turned to darkness, and the darkness turned to a day, and then another, my heart started to feel heavy, like a stone in my chest. No call, no text, no David. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I drove to his apartment, but the door was locked and his car wasn't there. The landlord said he hadn't paid rent. That night, I held 2 crying little girls in my arms, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I had no idea the worst was still to come, 12 years later, with a lie so cruel it could only have come from his own son. "Where's Daddy, Grandma?" Lila's small, questioning voice broke through the haze of my panic like a tiny, sharp needle. It was the first morning after he vanished, and she was standing in my kitchen, her little hands wrapped around a glass of juice. That simple question, so full of innocent trust, was a cruel reminder of the gaping hole David had left in our lives. My heart ached so fiercely I thought it might shatter, but I forced a smile and just said, "He's gone on a little trip, sweetie. He'll be back soon." I told that lie 100 times over the next few weeks, a flimsy, hopeful story that crumbled a little more each time I repeated it. The girls looked at me with those big, searching eyes, and I could see the confusion growing in their faces, a shadow I couldn't chase away. A part of me still believed he would walk through the door. I'd jump every time the phone rang, thinking it was him. But the calls never came. The bills did. The letters from lawyers did. They came for the car, for the furniture, for everything he had left behind. They came for the girls, 2 emails from Child Protective Services asking me if I was their guardian, if I knew where their father was. It was a constant, low-grade terror, a fear that they would be taken from me, from the only home they had left. Every night, I would sit in my old armchair, watching the news, praying for a miracle. I would look at the pictures of David and his girls on my mantelpiece, a different man in a different time, and I'd wonder what had happened. He had been so proud of them, always showing them off to his friends. How could he just disappear? My small social security check and my part-time job at the local diner were barely enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. My savings, intended for my own retirement, were dwindling fast. I had to sell my late husband's old fishing boat just to buy Chloe new shoes. I never complained. But I had no idea the secrets he had buried would resurface and threaten to destroy the life I had worked so hard to build for his daughters. The real reason he left was about to be revealed, and it was far worse than anything I could have imagined. 12 years. 12 years of birthday parties with an empty chair, of school plays where the girls looked for him in the crowd, of holidays where we pretended he was on a secret mission. We built a life, a quiet, simple, and loving one. We were a family. But every single time I looked at Lila's laugh or Chloe's serious eyes, I saw him, and a small part of me would crumble. He was a ghost in my house, a presence you could feel but never see. The girls grew, and so did the questions. Grandma, why doesn't our dad call us? Grandma, is he really okay? I had no answers. My heart was a constant ache of silence and unanswered prayers. Then, one Thursday morning, a letter arrived. It was in a thick, expensive-looking envelope, a kind of paper that felt wrong in my old hands. The return address was a law firm I'd never heard of, in a city I'd never visited. My hands trembled as I opened it, and the words swam before my eyes. Regarding the custody of Lila and Chloe. I felt like I was going to be sick. It wasn't a letter from David. It was from his lawyers. David wasn't just back, he was coming for them, and he had a plan. My stomach twisted with a new, horrifying kind of fear. This wasn't a son coming home. This was a man coming to take what he thought was his. I sat down at my kitchen table, my head in my hands, and felt the hot tears roll down my cheeks. The girls had done so well. Lila was a junior in high school, an artist with big dreams. Chloe was a fierce little athlete with a scholarship offer. They were happy. They were mine. And now, this ghost, this man who had abandoned them, wanted to snatch them away. But the letter didn't just talk about custody. It mentioned a recent change in David's circumstances, a large inheritance. A sudden, cold thought crept into my mind, was this a coincidence? Did he only want them back because he finally had money? Was this a twisted kind of transaction? A new kind of betrayal? The letter said a court date was set for next month. A quiet storm had just entered our lives, and I knew that this man, my son, would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. That letter wasn't just a demand for custody, it was a character assassination. I sat at my kitchen table, reading every cruel word, and felt a hot, righteous anger rise up in my chest. The document claimed I had unlawfully withheld his children, that I had manipulated them into believing their father had abandoned them. It was a bold-faced lie, a complete reversal of the truth. He painted me as the villain, and himself as the heartbroken father who had been desperately searching for his girls for 12 years. My head spun. The audacity of it all was breathtaking. My hand shook so much I had to put the paper down. How could he do this? How could he look at his own mother and lie so easily? The small, quiet life I had built with his daughters, a life full of sacrifices and love, was now being twisted into a criminal act. That evening, a small act of kindness broke through the storm. I was in the garden, trying to clear my head, and my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, came over. She saw the state I was in. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just brought me a slice of her famous apple pie, still warm from the oven. "You look like you need this, Margaret," she said, her voice soft and kind. I took a bite, and the taste of cinnamon and apples felt like a small bit of comfort in the middle of a war. She knew David had left. She had seen me raising the girls. She had watched them grow up. Her simple kindness, her unspoken understanding, was the only thing that kept me from falling apart. But my anger wasn't gone. It was simmering now, a low, hot flame. I saw the girls laughing and doing their homework in the living room, completely oblivious to the legal battle that was about to rage around them. They deserved the truth, not a story filled with David's lies. I needed to fight back, not just for myself, but for them. I had to prove that I was their mother in every way that mattered. The letter mentioned a powerful law firm, a sign that he was taking this seriously. It also mentioned his new life, his new wife. He had moved on. He had a new family now, a new chapter he had started without even a backward glance. Was he trying to replace the daughters he had abandoned? I had to find a way to expose him. My revenge wouldn't be loud or angry. It would be quiet. It would be methodical. And it would be done with the love of a mother, a love that he couldn't possibly understand. The first phone call from David came 3 days after the letter. My hands were trembling as I picked up the receiver. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice flat and unemotional, as if he were calling for a forgotten jacket. No apology. "No, I'm sorry, I've been gone for so long." "Nothing." He jumped straight into it. "I'm a different man now. I have a new life, a good job. I can give the girls things you can't. They need me." The words hit me like stones. He wasn't talking about my granddaughters, he was talking about possessions. It was a transaction. He didn't mention the years of hard work, the scraped knees, the homework, the late nights. My heart felt hollowed out, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "David," I said, trying to be calm, "do you have any idea what we've been through?" He just scoffed. "I know, Mom. It's a shame you kept them from me for so long. But that's all going to change." My phone call with a pro bono lawyer was a stark contrast. Her name was Sarah Jenkins, and her voice was sharp but full of empathy. She listened to my story without interruption, and when I was done, she said, "He's banking on you not having the resources to fight him, Margaret. This is a classic power play. We will fight this." Her words were a lifeline. She saw me. She saw the truth of my struggle. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. A small fire of resilience began to burn in my chest. David might have money, but I had something he didn't, the truth. But hope was a fragile thing. After I hung up, I went to Lila's room. She was sketching in her notebook, her long hair falling in front of her face. She looked so peaceful. I saw the intricate details in her drawings, the way she captured a moment. She was a woman now, full of grace and talent, and it was a life that David had no part of. The idea that he might rip this away from her, from both of them, made my blood run cold. My fear was quickly overshadowed by a new, more dangerous feeling, a cold, hard resolve. David didn't just abandon them, he had abandoned them and then blamed me for it. His entire new life was built on a lie. How did he get all this money? I knew something wasn't right. I knew I had to find the truth, and I would. I finally got a look at David's new life. It was all over social media. I'm not very good with computers, but Chloe, bless her heart, knew how to find anything. She found his public profile and showed it to me one night, her face full of a quiet kind of pain. There he was, smiling beside a woman with bright blonde hair and a perfect white smile, standing in front of a giant house that looked like something out of a magazine. There were pictures of him on vacation, in fancy restaurants, and at parties. He looked happy. He looked successful. And in his captions, he talked about his beautiful family and his second chance at life. It was a punch to the gut. The betrayal wasn't just that he left. It was that he had a beautiful, carefree life, a life built on his own selfishness, while I struggled for so long to raise his girls. That night, I saw a kindness I would never forget. Lila saw the look on my face. She came and sat next to me, took the phone, and quietly put it away. She didn't say a word about what she saw. She just put her arm around my shoulder and leaned her head against me. "You've always been our mom, Grandma," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. "No one can ever change that." It was a simple sentence, but it was all I needed to hear. That was my revenge, right there, their love. His lies and his money couldn't buy what I had. But the quiet love didn't change the facts. His social media told a story, but it also hinted at something else. There were photos of a man with an older, dignified face, a man he called my beloved mentor. He was always with David and his new wife, always smiling, always in the background of their pictures. He was a constant presence. Was this the large inheritance the letter mentioned? My stomach tightened. The lawyer had told me that a lot of these new lives are built on something dark. A new life doesn't just appear out of thin air. Something didn't feel right. My instincts, the same instincts that had me holding my granddaughters close for 12 years, told me there was a story here, a story he was desperately trying to keep hidden. The phone rang late one night. It was Sarah, my lawyer. Her voice was low and urgent. "Margaret, I think I know how he's doing this. That man in his pictures, the mentor he's always with? He's not a mentor. He's David's new wife's father. And he's dying." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't a sudden inheritance. This was something far more cynical. David was preying on a dying old man's love for his daughter, using it to secure his future. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces clicked into place. The new wife, the perfect life, the expensive lawyer, it was all a facade, built on the grief and hope of a vulnerable man. This wasn't a redemption story, it was a con. The audacity of it was breathtaking. That night, a small act of kindness felt monumental. I went to the pantry and found a jar of peach preserves I'd made with Chloe the summer before. The memory of her small, sticky hands smashing peaches with a spoon brought a gentle warmth to my heart. We had laughed so hard that day. The preserves were a taste of a love he couldn't buy, a memory he couldn't steal. I knew then that my fight was about more than just a house or a car. It was about proving that my life, the life I'd built for the girls, was real. It was full of messy, honest, sweet moments, not like the glossy, empty world he was trying to create. But a new, cold determination settled over me. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a fight for the truth, for the integrity of our family. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He wanted to play the victim? He wanted to accuse me of stealing his children? I would show him what a thief really looked like. The dying old man, the wealthy father-in-law, was the key. He had a family trust. My lawyer said that sometimes, if a person feels they've been wronged, they can challenge the terms of a trust. I didn't want his money. I just wanted to expose his deceit. I wanted justice for my girls, and for myself. This man who had abandoned his children to save his own skin would now face the consequences of his actions. I knew what I had to do. My stomach was a knot of nerves as I walked into the law firm. My lawyer, Sarah, had arranged a mediation with David and his lawyer. I hadn't seen David's face since that terrible day, and seeing him again, sitting across a cold, polished table, was a shock. He looked smug, like he already knew he had won. He talked about his new family and how it was the perfect environment for the girls. He never once looked me in the eye. He looked past me, as if I were a piece of furniture in a room he was trying to buy. The way he spoke about Lila and Chloe, as if they were pawns in his game, made my blood boil. They need a father in their lives, he said, his voice full of self-importance. And I'm a different man now. Then his lawyer spoke, and the words were like a slap. Mrs. Reynolds, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, the girls have a right to their biological father. Your financial situation is tenuous, and the court will see that Mr. Reynolds can provide a superior life for them. She held up a thick file, filled with numbers and photos of his giant house. It was the injustice of it all. The 12 years of sleepless nights and making ends meet, the years of love and sacrifice, meant nothing to them. It was all about money. But Sarah, my lawyer, was a pit bull. She leaned forward, her voice a low growl. Superior life? Is that what you call a life built on abandoning your children? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you left. David's face went white. He fidgeted in his seat. The smugness was gone. My revenge was starting right now, with these simple questions. The room went silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. He had no answers. He had nothing. But his lawyer quickly cut in. My client will not be answering personal questions. We are here to discuss a fair and amicable resolution. They wanted me to give up. They wanted me to settle. But I had come too far for that. I looked at David, and for the first time our eyes met. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked afraid. My revenge was just beginning, and he knew it. I had no idea the secrets he was hiding were even darker than I imagined. He was panicking. This meeting was the first step in a long, drawn-out battle. And I was going to win. My lawyer, Sarah, had a feeling that David's inheritance from his new father-in-law, Mr. Larson, wasn't just a regular handout. She'd been digging, and what she found was more twisted than I could have imagined. Sarah called me one evening, her voice filled with a quiet outrage. "Margaret, I've found it," she said. "Mr. Larson, David's new father-in-law, is a very wealthy man, but the money isn't just a gift. It's a trust, and it's contingent." I asked her to explain. "It's a conditional inheritance," she said. "The trust is set up to provide for his daughter, but the money is only released to her and her husband if they can prove they're a complete and stable family. David has to legally adopt or have a child with his new wife to gain full access to the trust." I felt a shiver of horror run down my spine. The pieces clicked into place. He wasn't just trying to get the girls back. He was trying to get a family, any family, to unlock the money. The girls were just a means to an end. It was the most cynical, calculating act of cruelty I had ever heard of. My heart was heavy that night. I was a grandma who made peanut butter cookies and knitted scarves, and here I was, in the middle of a legal battle against my own son, a man who saw his daughters as a business deal. I was sitting on my porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the dark, and feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Then, Lila came and sat beside me. She didn't know the details of the trust, but she knew something was wrong. She just sat there with me in the quiet, and her presence was a comfort, a silent promise that we would get through this together. But the night was not over. A new thought, cold and precise, entered my mind. If David needed a child to unlock his fortune, what if he already had one? What if the girls weren't enough? I needed to dig deeper. I needed to know more about his new wife. Maybe she was a part of this plan. Maybe she wasn't as innocent as she seemed. My revenge was no longer just about exposing him. It was about dismantling this entire, fraudulent life he had built on the backs of his own children. I had to find a way to get to Mr. Larson. I had to let him know the truth about the man he was about to give all his money to. My lawyer was right. There was more to David's wife than her perfect smile. Her name was Victoria. My lawyer had a private investigator friend look into her, and what he found was shocking. Victoria had a past. She was a woman who had been through a lot, but what caught my attention was a long-ago charge for fraud. It wasn't a major offense, but it was there, a stain on her record. It showed a pattern of behavior, a willingness to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. My heart sank. David hadn't just found a new love. He had found a partner in crime, a woman who was just as willing to manipulate a sick old man to get his money. It was a new layer of betrayal. The girls were a tool for them both. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. That evening, as I was hanging the laundry on the line, the sun was setting, painting the sky in a fiery orange and purple. A small, simple beauty that was so different from the ugliness of the legal battle. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, walked by and saw me. She gave me a gentle smile and a wave. Her simple presence was a reminder that there was still goodness in the world, that not everyone was out to get you. It was a small kindness that kept me going. But the kindness did not stop the wheels from turning in my mind. The investigator found something else, something even more shocking. He found an old social media post from Victoria, a post she had since deleted. It was a picture of a baby girl, a newborn. The caption read, "My little angel." The baby looked to be just a few months old. My heart hammered in my chest. If this was her child, where was she now? Had David used her? Was this the child he was supposed to adopt to get the inheritance? It was a cold, hard thought, a new layer of horror. I knew then that David was even more dangerous than I thought. I had to find a way to prove that the girls were not just a means to an end for him. I had to show the world his true character. And I knew just how to do it. Sarah, my lawyer, was on a mission. She had found a former employee of Mr. Larson's, a man named Robert. He had been a live-in aide for Mr. Larson for years and had a front-row seat to David and Victoria's scheming. Sarah had gotten in touch with him, and he was willing to talk. He was willing to be a witness. He was a kind, gentle man, but his voice was full of anger and disappointment. "That boy is a snake," he said over the phone. He promised that old man the world, and all he wanted was his money. They used that poor old man's kindness to get what they wanted. It was sickening to watch. My heart broke for Mr. Larson. He was an innocent victim, just like my daughters. That afternoon, I was at the grocery store, and I ran into an old friend, Carol. We hadn't talked in years. She looked at me and said, "Margaret, you look like you've been through a war. You've been so strong, raising those girls all by yourself. We all see it." Her words, so simple and true, were a balm to my aching heart. They were a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. My community saw what I had done. They knew the truth. But her kindness didn't change the fact that David was a master manipulator. He had a witness of his own, a friend who would lie for him, a man he had paid to say he had been helping David search for the girls for years. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. We had to prove that Robert was telling the truth, and that David's witness was a fraud. My lawyer, Sarah, had a plan. We would confront David with the truth about his actions, about the trust, about the dying old man, and about the secret baby. We would hit him with all of it, right in the courtroom, where he couldn't hide. The final confrontation was coming. The day of the court hearing arrived, a gray, dreary morning that seemed to mirror the mood inside my stomach. David and Victoria were there, dressed in expensive suits, looking like the picture of a perfect couple. David had a smug smile on his face. He thought he had me. He thought he was going to walk out of that courtroom with his daughters and his inheritance, and he was going to leave me with nothing. But he didn't know I had a secret weapon, a secret witness. He didn't know I knew about the trust. He didn't know I knew about his new wife's past. He didn't know about the secret baby. He had no idea what was about to happen. His lawyer spoke first, a smooth, practiced voice, full of condescending pity. She painted a picture of me as an old woman who was too old, too poor, and too stubborn to give the girls back to their rightful father. She talked about my unhealthy attachment to the girls, as if the love I had for them was a disease. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. My hands, hidden in my lap, were clenched into fists. I wanted to scream. But then my lawyer, Sarah, stood up. She was short, but she was a force of nature. She looked right at David and said, "Mr. Reynolds, can you tell us why you didn't contact your children for 12 years? Is it because you were busy trying to get an inheritance?" David's smug smile vanished. He looked at his lawyer, his eyes wide with panic. The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "I was trying to find them. I swear." But the lie was thin and full of holes. He looked at me, his eyes full of a new kind of terror. He knew I had him. My revenge was sweet, but it was also terrifying. It was a quiet, controlled anger, a simmering rage that was about to boil over. He knew I was going to expose him, and he was going to pay for every single lie he had told, for every single tear he had caused, for every single day I had spent worrying about his daughters, the girls he had abandoned. The courtroom was silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. David had just lied, and Sarah, my lawyer, knew it. She looked at the judge, then back at David, and said, "Your Honor, we have a witness who can prove that Mr. Reynolds was not searching for his children for the past 12 years. We have a witness who can prove he was in fact living a life of luxury, a life he had to earn." David looked at his lawyer, his eyes wide with panic. "I don't know what she's talking about," he stammered. "I was." Sarah cut him off. "Let's be clear, Mr. Reynolds," she said. "The inheritance you're expecting from Mr. Larson is not a gift. It's a payment, a reward for you and your wife. The money is only yours if you can prove you're a complete and stable family. You abandoned your children because you knew that they would be a liability. You abandoned them for your own financial gain." The words hit him like a punch. He looked at me, his eyes full of a raw, unadulterated hatred. He was exposed. All of his lies, all of his deceit, were now out in the open. That night, a small act of kindness broke through the storm. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, and Chloe came in. She had been quiet all day, watching the courtroom drama unfold. She looked at me and said, "Grandma, you were amazing today. You were so strong." Her words, so simple and true, were a balm to my aching heart. They were a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. But her kindness didn't change the fact that David was a master manipulator. He had a witness of his own, a friend who would lie for him, a man he had paid to say he had been helping David search for the girls for years. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. We had to prove that Robert was telling the truth, and that David's witness was a fraud. My lawyer, Sarah, had a plan. We would confront David with the truth about his actions, about the trust, about the dying old man, and about the secret baby. We would hit him with all of it, right in the courtroom, where he couldn't hide. The final confrontation was coming. David's friend, a man named Mike, took the stand. He was slick, with a well-rehearsed story about how he had helped David search for his daughters for 12 years. He talked about placing ads in newspapers and calling different child services agencies. He made it sound like David had been a heartbroken father, desperately trying to find his girls. The lie was so smooth, so well practiced, that for a moment, I almost believed it myself. My heart sank. What if the judge believed him? What if all of my hard work, all of Sarah's digging, was for nothing? What if David's lie was stronger than my truth? Then, Sarah stood up to cross-examine him. She was calm, but her voice was full of a quiet menace. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "you said you helped Mr. Reynolds search for his children. Did you ever go to their school? Did you ever visit my client, the woman who was raising them?" Mike hesitated. "No," he said, "we didn't want to upset the children. We were waiting for the right time." Sarah smiled, a cold, thin smile. "The right time? You've had 12 years, Mr. Johnson. It seems to me that the right time for you was when Mr. Reynolds' new father-in-law gave him an inheritance." Mike's face went white. The smugness was gone. The lie was exposed. He was a fraud, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. My revenge was sweet, but it was also terrifying. It was a quiet, controlled anger, a simmering rage that was about to boil over. He knew I was going to expose him, and he was going to pay for every single lie he had told, for every single tear he had caused, for every single day I had spent worrying about his daughters, the girls he had abandoned.